In business today, three things to know. First, a Christmas party for the GDP. The nation's gross domestic product jumps 5%. The Dow climbs over 18,000. Does this celebration go through the new year? Then, now showing. Sony flips and will release the interview on Christmas Day. But the embarrassed movie studio says it may still sue Twitter and others who shared stolen emails. And business makes a booty call.
Baby got back. Yeah, baby.
How big bots became big business. Horizon Exchange starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. You know, we debated all day. Should we lead with the gross domestic product or the story about big butts? These are sort of the conversations we have at Arise News. We decided to lead with the GDP, but this in no way diminishes the big butt story, so stick around for it. The U.S. economy continues to be a world unto itself. While parts of Europe head towards a recession, the U.S. economy grew at a strong 5% in the third quarter. The Commerce Department revising up its gross domestic product number today. The GDP driven by surprisingly strong consumer and business spending. That number is the best the U.S. economy has recorded in 11 years. Now, we will have more analysis on the GDP in a moment. But first, the Dow turned 18 today, 18,000 for the first time. Here are the final numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average climbing up 64 points to a record 18,024.17. The S&P 500 up fractionally, and the Nasdaq did pull back a fraction, down 16 to 47.65. Some of the top stocks we are watching today. Walgreens reporting third quarter profits boosted by record prescription orders. Earnings per share came out ahead of analyst estimates. Walgreens climbing up 2.25. Apple kicking up its online prices after opening up sales again in Russia. The price hike is meant to counter a falling ruble. Apple has also implemented a software update to fix a bug that might allow hackers to take over users' computers. Apple closing down 40 cents. And bitter chocolate. Hershey's is one of several chocolate makers accused of price fixing along with Nestle and Mars. The Canadian government says those companies conspired to fix the price of chocolate. Hershey closing up $1.64. And a look at commodities. Gold down 5.10. Oil having a nice day, up nearly 4% to $57.11 a barrel. Durable goods orders in the U.S. unexpectedly fell by 0.7% rather last month, according to the Commerce Department, over a weaker demand for military equipment. But U.S. consumer sentiment jumped in December to its highest level in nearly 8 years. Falling gas prices and a better jobs outlook credited for that. The Thomson Reuters University of Michigan reading came in at 93.6. That's the best since 2007. And the Commerce Department says low gas prices also helped consumer spending rise by 0.6% in November, its biggest gain in 3 months. So let's talk more about the GDP. John Manley is the Chief Equity Strategist at Wells Fargo Funds Management. John, welcome back to Arise Exchange.
Thank you, Andrew.
A little bit of a surprise with the gross domestic product, 5%. Yes. What drove it?
The first quarter. I think it's a little bit of stealing from Peter to pay Paul. I think that if you look at the year-over-year number, it wasn't that strong. It was a good recovery. Glad to see it because it didn't show up before. But I think the economy is running at about a 3% pace.
And so is that what we're going to basically see for the whole year, about 3%?
That's where we are right now, and I don't see any reason to change that number.
Okay, and you talk about the first quarter. That was that disastrous first quarter, largely weather where the economy actually snowed and the economy kind of pulled back a little bit.
Right, and I think we're just getting that back, which is good because it doesn't have to come back. But I don't think it indicates that kind of inherent strength.
We don't like to talk about bad news, but in this number, we've got strong consumer spending and strong business spending. Right. Some have said that's a very volatile number traditionally because of the durable goods slump, that this 5% GDP doesn't feel as real as it should be.
At the basis of it all is the consumer. I mean, we're it. This is America. We're a consuming country. And those numbers are good. And if those numbers are good, they will eventually take over and overwhelm almost anything else. Durable goods is important, but it pales in comparison to the American consumer, and it eventually follows and tries to anticipate what the American consumer is going to do.
And what does it say about personal income as well? Are people earning more money, or is it simply that they have more money to spend because of falling gas prices?
They have more money to spend because of falling gas prices, so they don't have to earn more money. They also feel better about what they own. I mean, compare this to 2, 3, 4 years ago where I owned a house. I didn't know what it was worth. I didn't know how much I could spend. I have a sense of not only what my income is, but my wealth is important because I don't necessarily spend directly from income. It's a little bit of a pool in there. The money goes in, the money goes out. It pools, and if I feel better about my house, my wealth, my stock investments, I'm more likely to spend more than I would otherwise.
And that's maybe tied into the consumer sentiment numbers we got as well, which means people are feeling better and the economy is psychologically based.
You know, it's hard to believe, but in a few weeks, 7 years ago will be 2008. And that's a strange way of thinking about it. That's a long time ago. That's a long, long time ago. And gradually, these things are getting smaller in the rearview mirror.
You know, we said at the top of the program about the U.S. being a world unto itself. How long can we be the best-looking house in a bad neighborhood, which is, I think, something you've referred to in the past?
Well, not for long, but I think we pull the neighborhood up rather than them pulling us down. We're still America. Somebody's got to lead us out of a recession. In the recent past, it was emerging markets. They had more inherent growth. They were coming off lower levels, and at times it was Europe. This time it's us. It's the countries that use quantitative pressure most effectively, the U.S. and the U.K. that have come the furthest, and now those who didn't are starting to imitate those who did. Now, what do you think that means for those markets? I think it's a positive sign for them, maybe less positive for us, but if we're good, they're better, it's still all good.
Okay, looking at the first quarter now of 2015, where do you see the equity markets performing?
You know, we have a target that's going to be roughly up 7 or 8% for the year, but that's
for 2015.
For 2015, but that's a non-target. That's just saying, you know, if nothing happens, you know, what hasn't happened. And what people are missing is money hasn't been pulled into the equity market so far. It's been pushed in by the Fed.
What do you mean by that?
Do you remember in 2000 how people had to buy stocks because they had a great story? I've got to buy XYZ, not because I have to put my money to work. I got to buy XYZ because I think it's a real winner. I think that hasn't happened yet. And whether you go back and look at the great bull markets, they always end with that phase that goes on for some time where money's being pulled in by good stories. The Fed doesn't have to push it in. You know, they've been pushing it towards the economy. It flows through us. So that's fine. As long as they don't pull it out, at some point in time, the fundamentals start to pull people in. That almost always happens, and it hasn't happened yet, so I think it's in front of us.
Okay, John Manley, have a good New Year. Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Coming up, if North Korea is behind the cyber attack on Sony, why is Sony thinking of suing Twitter? You're watching Arise Exchange. Stay with us.
Unrest continues in Ferguson, Missouri. Exactly what happened to Michael Brown Jr.'s memorial. The NFL fallout continues. Why does this video change the game? President Barack Obama met with congressional leaders today.
He does not need congressional approval to carry out the strikes.
The only language understood by killers like this is the language of force.
Do I want to have a draft? No, because I don't want to have war.
Hello and welcome to Arise America. I'm Debbie Turner-Bell.
Informative. Wall Street, more treats than tricks for Investors Friday as the markets closed out the week at record highs. Compelling. China is the world's largest economy. Of course, the numbers are a little bit milked. If you actually believed that drinking Red Bull would give you wings, you're about to collect $10.
Tim Cook coming out as gay, being in the forefront, it shows that there's diversity in leadership.
All business. It was the best day for the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ all year. Entertaining money daily.
We're in a slow growth but not a no growth economy.
Arise Exchange.
I think that people in America do care about what happens throughout the world.
Global warming is probably something that has to be addressed sooner rather than later.
From Somalia and the genocide there, and that's something people don't know about. They have no idea the brevity of that situation.
The first thing I think about when I think of Africa is like war and famine and disease.
And right now with the tsunami that happened or the earthquakes in, Japan, we always look out for other people.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to Arise Exchange. After all the back and forth, Sony has decided, after all, to release its controversial movie, The Interview, in a limited run on Christmas Day. This comes after new threats by North Korea to strike against the White House, Pentagon, and the entire U.S. after the FBI named the rogue country in the hacking of Sony. But there are still legal issues ahead. And John Burns, Arise News legal correspondent, joins us now from Washington, D.C. to talk about it a little bit. John, welcome to Arise Exchange.
Thank you.
So Sony seems to be flailing around here trying to blame somebody, and the latest is that they're threatening to sue Twitter if Twitter doesn't deactivate the accounts of those who repeated the emails that were hacked. Any legal basis for Sony to go after Twitter?
Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. They do have a legal basis. First of all, if this is copyrighted information, that's protected by the Copyright Act and some other U.S. laws as well. So, I mean, based upon republishing copyrighted information, Twitter could be on the hook for that. So I think ultimately Twitter will acquiesce to what Sony's requesting, because not only is it violation of American laws, it's also a violation of Twitter's own internal policies.
Are emails copyrighted material?
Well, there's emails. There's also copyrighted works. Some
true.
of the screenplays and things of that sort as well.
Okay.
So that's definitely prohibited. And then confidential information is also prohibited as well.
All right. And so, but doesn't Twitter have some protection here under the Communications Act because it doesn't curate material?
That's true. I mean, obviously there are protections that exist for Twitter, but I think they just want to kind of stay ahead of this, and Sony's just trying to mitigate their clients' risk and their clients' damages. I think Twitter would only lose if they kind of make this too difficult for this information to be removed. I think it makes sense. I think people are speaking out against it, and I think it makes sense for Twitter to ultimately remove this information because it doesn't really do any harm to them.
Okay, and Sony has a harder fight, though, when it's threatening media outlets reporting about the hacking, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fight that Sony is not going to win. The media is allowed to do what the media does, and that is based just reporting newsworthy events. And the First Amendment to the Constitution protects that. We have to remember freedom of the press is very highly guarded. And, I mean, there's been precedent here, a Supreme Court case back in 2001, where the court held that the media cannot be held liable for simply reporting on information that might be illegally obtained by third parties. And that's simply what the media is doing in this situation.
Okay, now people who have been hacked with their emails complain about so-called privacy, but walk us through why privacy regarding company emails does not necessarily exist.
Well, yeah, so as an employee, you do not have a right to privacy in the emails at your workplace. Obviously, your employer actually owns the email system, and as an employer is allowed to review and monitor what's going out and what's coming into the workplace. And that's very important business reasons for that, because an employer wants to make sure that nothing inappropriate, nothing defamatory is going out based upon, a representation of the company. So they have to safeguard that, and that's why that's in place.
Now, Sony itself is going to face lawsuits here. What kind of actions is Sony potentially liable for?
Well, yeah, so a number of lawsuits have been filed against Sony by current and former employees who in essence are claiming negligence. They're claiming that Sony did not institute the proper safeguards to protect their confidential and personal information that was ultimately hacked and widely disseminated. So 5 class action lawsuits have been filed by current and former employees.
Do they have a case on this one? Because this was a criminal action.
Well, it was a criminal action, but it's going to be a foreseeable threshold. So the court's going to look at, was it foreseeable that there could be a data breach here? Was Sony in any way knowledgeable of a potential data breach? So they're going to look at that, number one. Then number two, they're going to look at industry standards. What was the standard across the board in terms of other similar companies? What type of data security procedures and protocols did they have in place? And did Sony meet that standard?
And finally, if the United States can show that North Korea was in fact behind the attack, I imagine Sony, for what it's worth, could sue North Korea.
For what it's worth,
well, we don't hold any of their assets here, do we?
We
there's
do not.
Nothing to go after.
We do not. International law is very, very difficult terrain, and North Korea is kind of outside that terrain to really be prosecuted. So that would be very difficult, if not impossible.
Okay, John Burns, Arise News legal correspondent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, time now for our business ticker stories making headlines across the nation and the world. Russia's financial woes mount. The country gives $500 million to bail out a mid-sized bank to prevent bankruptcy due to the collapsing ruble. And the ratings agency Standard & Poor's warns that Russia's debt could be downgraded to junk status. Alibaba spending real money to fight fakes. The world's largest e-commerce company has doled out $160 million since 2013 to reduce counterfeit products on its site. During its big sale in November, called Singles Day, nearly 11% of products sold were identified as fake or suspicious. Coffee maker Keurig Green Mountain is recalling more than 7 million single-serve brewing machines in the United States and Canada, warning the machines could overheat and injure consumers by spraying hot liquid. Ouch. The malfunction is likely to occur when brewing more than 2 cups in quick succession, so just have 1 cup at a time, please. An ousted American Apparel founder and CEO Dov Charney says he is down to his last $100,000, and now he's sleeping on a friend's couch in New York's Lower East Side. Charney was fired for inappropriate conduct after an investigation, and he's now suing the investment firm that pledged to help get him his job back. It has been a record-breaking year for initial public offerings. The United States leads the world in the number of deals and total capital raised, with more than $95 billion raised and 288 IPOs this year. This is the best showing in 14 years, analysts say, and next year, could he be even better? Nick Einhorn is the senior analyst at Renaissance Capital and joins us now by phone to tell us about some of the biggest deals of the year. Nick, welcome to Rise Exchange.
Thanks.
All right, so what kind of drove the IPOs after so many years of a terrible IPO market? Why the pop in 2014?
Well, we've seen a kind of steady comeback since the financial crisis. And this year really has, the biggest thing is just that there's been nothing that's gone wrong with the market. There hasn't been a shock like, say, the Euro debt crisis or a specific thing like Facebook's botched offering that pulled back the rails. So really, it's been a kind of good year from start to finish for the IPO market.
Yeah, but for such a long time, companies were reluctant to go public. And so what turned around from a company perspective, do you think, to kind of push these deals through?
Well, it varies by sector. We did see a lot of tech deals delay IPOs this year, like Box, for example. But some of the biggest sectors were biotechs. There were 71 biotech IPOs this year, which is far more than any other recent year, and possibly more than any year ever. And that's a lot of specific things about the patent cliff and kind of the new methods of drug discovery that have come about. And then it was a good year for energy IPOs up until the last 2 months. But obviously, before oil dropped off, there's a lot of interest in shale drilling. And so there's kind of a lot of specific areas that companies have been willing to come to the market, and investors have generally been willing to buy them.
Do you think the same sectors are going to do well in 2015 in the IPO market?
Well, definitely energy will not, as far as things stand right now, that there's going to be a drastic drop in energy deals. But I think healthcare will continue to be active, although I'd be surprised if we met the number of biotech deals this year. I think tech should stay active. Financial was also busy this sector, and I think as long as interest rates don't do anything drastic, then we could see a fair amount of financial IPOs next year too.
And how did the IPOs perform for both, let's say, the companies that went public and the investors who purchased?
Performance was generally good, if unexceptional. So the average return was about 15 to 20%, which is within the historical average, and I think it's a good level for sustained issuance. And it was a lot more disciplined than last year. Last year, the average IPO returned over 40%. So this was kind of a return to normalcy on the return front. But generally, investors did pretty well.
What about the quality of the IPOs? You remember in the early days of the tech bubble, companies were going public. They had no real earnings. They had a very short track record. Did we see more of a track record for most of the companies that went public this year?
Certainly relative to the tech bubble, companies are much more established. But we did see, I think, investor risk tolerance pick up this year a little, and last year too. And a lot of that's manifest in the biotech space, which are obviously riskier companies. And we did see a lot of tech companies that are losing a lot of money come public. Hortonworks is a recent example. There were many others at the beginning of the year before tech multiples kind of corrected. But as a whole, I think there hasn't been a drastic change over the last few years. We've seen a lot of established companies and some that are a little newer, but generally have kind of shown that they have a business model that has some merit to them.
And are we going to see some big names go public next year? Do you think of, for example, Uber and the companies that have really been in the news?
Yeah, it's certainly likely that I think we'll see some of those names like, Uber and Airbnb, Spotify, those kinds of big name companies. But we know in general there's a very big backlog of companies looking to go public, and a lot of names that are not sort of the household names, but just a lot of smaller companies too.
And Nick, real quick to wrap up, Congress changed some of the rules about going public. Did that play a role here in these companies going public this year?
The Jobs Act, which you referred to a few years ago, I don't think it has made a huge difference. It's more about the supply of companies on the one hand and how investors are viewing them on the other hand.
Okay. Nick Einhorn with Renaissance Capital. Thank you so much. Have a good new year.
You too.
Coming up, what do you do when you're a lawyer who can't live on $2.2 million a year? Our favorite person of the day is next.
There is a reason Africa is called the new frontier. What was once potential is now an opportunity ready to be seized. Once revered for our resources, today's wealth lies in our people. People who build the cities that shape the future. People who know an idea in one place means business in another. A generation for whom technology means there are no borders, no boundaries. We are the new lions in a brave new world, kings of the urban jungle. And there's a bank that puts the world in our pocket and the future in our hands. UBA, Africa's global bank.
Tragedy in Pakistan where Taliban gunmen launched a bloody attack.
They have never involved women and children in any war. This time they have.
Young children carried away in ambulances, a teacher burned alive. The images are absolutely gut-wrenching.
This is a heinous act. Some might even call it pure evil.
The real problem is extremism in the country, and that they're going to have to eventually take on all the extremist groups.
Hello and welcome to Arise America. I'm Debbie Turner-Bell.
Time now for our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention and not for the right reasons. Today, it is a partner at a New York law firm who decided her $2.2 million annual salary and bonus was just not enough to support her luxury lifestyle. Federal prosecutors say Kayla Ravello, a partner at the highfalutin Wilkie Farr and Gallagher law firm, created a series of fake companies with her husband in order to steal $5.75 million from other law firms. Ravello, a graduate of Columbia Law School, allegedly created the companies and then charged the firms for bogus legal consulting fees. The New Jersey lawyer needed the money because, according to the government, she bought hundreds of thousands of dollars of paintings, condos, and goods from Louis Vuitton and Hermes, where handbags topped $20,000 each. Ravello had some help in the scheme from her alleged drug-dealing husband. In a separate case, he is accused of being a leader of a drug trafficking ring where he allegedly tried to transport 50 pounds of cocaine from California to New Jersey. The legal blog Above the Law says the couple clearly should be on The Real Housewives of New Jersey. Just 2 months ago, Diversity magazine named Ravello a woman to watch. In the magazine, she was quoted as saying, "There are many paths to success." Maybe she meant that one of those paths is a life of crime. Ravello says the government case against her is weak, so Kayla Ravello is our favorite person of the day. Next, the booming business of butts. Yes, we said butts. How many are cashing in on the craze to have a bigger bottom? You're watching Arise Exchange. Stay with us.
Apple unveiled new products today. Did it meet expectations?
Apple stock is up 20%.
The White House says it has proper measures to contain the spread of Ebola. This seems to be, in some ways, exploding. What are officials saying?
We remain focused on working with our partners on the ground to stop the epidemic.
Enhanced measures have been put in place in Africa and the United States.
This is hitting home in a very real way, and I think, we need to be concerned.
Hello and welcome to Arise America. I'm Debbie Turner-Bell.
Global. It's Monday, so it must be time for a new round of sanctions against Russia. Nigeria is open for business, and you are getting a handle on this situation. Compelling. Time for liquid lunch, things that make us want to drink. Could she have been separated at birth from, say, Grimace? All business.
Money's coming out of these countries, and that flow is part of what's driving the equity markets.
Entertaining money daily.
It's about reimagining.
Arise Exchange.
I don't think the television news in the United States reflects the diversity of the world. I don't think it does a great job of even reflecting diversity of the United States.
When you are watching TV, you don't really see a lot of different cultures. There are plenty of other places that people might not even know about.
We are living in a global culture, and you cannot hide news that is happening when there's so much social media.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Business is making a booty call. The world is obsessed with bigger bottoms, and companies are cashing in. Everything from surgical procedures like the Brazilian butt lift and butt pads are in high demand. Experts say especially since celebrities including Nicki Minaj and Kim Kardashian proclaim that bigger is better. However, the trend does have a dark side. Many women and men have resorted to cheaper options, including injecting silicone into their buttocks, causing deaths in Miami, New York, and Las Vegas. Ouch. Mary Epner, Retail Analysis CEO, joins us to talk about this craze. Please do not inject plastic into your butt. That just doesn't sound like a great idea.
I don't need to, no. And I don't recommend it for anybody. But
tell us about this phenomenon.
So let's start with just the facts. Whoever you listen to or whatever publication you read, you will find that at least 65% of the American women have a size of size 12 or above. So you do the math and do the proportions, and with a big figure, or 12 isn't even that big, but if you're over a size 12, chances are you probably have a big butt. But for many years and decades, the fashion industry has been focused on very thin models, the models who go down the runway.
Unattainable model.
Exactly.
Unattainable looks.
And it's forever and ever. We see these great fashions, but they don't go beyond a size 8 or a 10. So it's led to frustration.
So this shift is somewhat celebrity-driven then, right?
Yes.
Some well-known celebrities like Minaj
Yes.
and Kim Kardashian have stood up and said enough is enough?
Exactly. Well, the thing of it is that about 15 years ago, we first saw it with Jennifer Lopez. And when she came on the scene, and she was really unashamed of her butt, and she was unashamed of her curves, and in fact, really embraced it. And that was even before social media. So she got a lot of followers, and her brand did really well at Macy's when that came out because it catered to that customer. And Macy's definitely caters to that customer. Coupled with that, there have been some more changes in the U.S. There are various ethnicities whose populations are growing, and generally some of those are known to have very large butts.
Okay, so how have retailers, let's start with the fashion lines, sort of responded to that?
Well, think about it. Many of the designers are using patterns that were done 40 years ago. And so now this very smart designers are starting to change the patterns, and they are doing a whole new set of measurements. And again, while in technology, things change literally every month, patterns in apparel have not changed for 4 decades. So they're changing those, and they've understood that there is a big market in this, no pun intended, and they're addressing it. So we have designers who are embracing it. And then I think also your point about Kim Kardashian, with her presence at fashion shows, what we're seeing is she is really getting into the publications of these very high-level designers like Givenchy, Lanvin, and that's really very, very new. That's never happened.
What's also interesting, though, is for those who have not, let's say, been endowed with a big butt, now there's a desire by some to have a big butt, right?
Absolutely.
And so what kind of business is that, basically? Who's doing what to do what?
Well, that is not really my wheelhouse. However, just doing a small amount of research on it, women will do whatever they need to do. If it's a matter of, particularly in songs, if you hear that guys like the big butts, then you have girls who are saying, okay, maybe I'll get this guy if I have a big butt. So they do the butt pads, they do the butt injections, implants, and the Brazilian butt. And to your point, it ranges anywhere from $5,000 on up, and I'm sure
amazing.
and so I'm sure in some other types of doctors' offices, much less, but again, they can be dangerous.
And this is primarily a woman issue, if I say. I mean, are men wanting big butts?
If they do, I'm not aware of that. It's a possibility. I've only explored the segment of the female population
so the
who's
question,
interested.
as somebody who studies, retail and
Yes.
studies both what we consider long-term trends and fads, where does this fit in on the spectrum?
This is here to stay.
Really?
It is. With social media, and we were just tallying up the number of Kardashian followers among the 3 sisters, and they have in excess of 50 million followers, and they are not afraid to show their butts on their Instagram pages. So it's here to stay, and it's a welcome change. I embrace it. I think it's wonderful because
It's sort
most
of the
women
idea,
don't look
and it's sort
like
of the
a model.
idea that moving towards natural beauty.
Absolutely, and that one doesn't need to be Giselle to be accepted or liked out there.
Okay, Mary Epner, Retail Analysis CEO. Thank you so much for coming on and
Thank you
talking
so
about
much
this.
for
We'll have
having
you
me.
back on soon.
Thank
Happy New
you.
Year. Tomorrow on Rise Exchange, it's a wine on a dime, finding great wines at good prices for the holidays. Let's take a look at the markets once again. That is a record for the Dow, up 64.73 to 18,024, in part driven by a spectacular number of the gross domestic product. The NASDAQ finishing, though, down in the red. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Thanks for watching Rise Exchange. We will see you here tomorrow.